Rotten eggs and burning poop. Greeley, Colorado is about 150 miles north of the Hannah Ranch, but it might as well be on another planet. You can smell Greeley long before you can see it. The smell is hard to forget, but not easy to describe. A combination of live animals, manure, and dead animals being turned into dog food. Think of rotten eggs mixed with burning hair and stinky toilet, and you get the idea. The smell is worst during the summer months, blanketing Greeley day and night like an invisible fog. Many people who live there no longer notice the smell. It fades into the background, present but not present, like the sound of police sirens and honking horns when you're in New York City. Other people who live in Greeley can't stop thinking about the smell, even after years. It seeps into everything, gives them headaches, makes them nauseous, interferes with their sleep. Greeley is a modern-day factory town where cattle are the main units of production, where workers and machines turn big animals into small vacuum-sealed packages of meat. The billions of fast food hamburgers that Americans eat every year come from places like Greeley. The industrialization of cattle raising and meat packing over the past few decades has completely altered the way beef is produced, and the towns that produce it. Responding to the demands of the fast food and supermarket chains, the meatpacking firms have cut their costs by cutting the wages of workers. They have turned one of the nation's best-paying factory jobs into one of the lowest-paying. They've recruited a workforce of poor immigrants who have little power and suffer terrible injuries on the job. The harms of this new meatpacking system are being felt not only by the workers employed by it, but also by the animals processed by it, and by the consumers who eat its meat. Welcome to Greeley, a sign along the highway says, an all-American city. Swift & Co. runs one of the nation's biggest meatpacking plants just a few miles north of downtown Greeley. Weld County, which includes Greeley, earns more money every year from livestock than any other county in the United States. Swift & Co. is the largest private employer in Weld County, running a beef slaughterhouse and a sheep slaughterhouse as well as processing facilities. Outside town, a pair of enormous feedlots supply the beef slaughterhouse with cattle. Each feedlot can hold up to 100,000 cattle. At times, the animals are crowded so closely together it looks like a sea of cattle, a mooing, moving mass of brown and white fur that goes on for acres. These cattle don't wander the prairie eating fresh grass. During the 3 months before slaughter, they eat special grain dumped into long concrete troughs that look like highway dividers. The grain is designed to fatten the cattle quickly, aided by growth hormones that have been implanted beneath their skin. Male cattle that will be processed for their meat are called steers. A typical steer will eat almost 3,000 pounds of grain during its stay at a feedlot, just to gain 400 pounds in weight. The process involves a good deal of waste. Each steer deposits about 50 pounds of urine and manure every day. Unlike human waste, this stuff isn't sent to a treatment plant. It's dumped into pits, gigantic pools of pee and poop that the industry calls lagoons. Slaughterhouse lagoons can be as big as 20 acres and as much as 15 feet deep, filled with millions of gallons of really disgusting stuff. As you might expect, the lagoons smell incredibly bad, and sometimes they leak, sending raw sewage into nearby rivers and streams. In 1991, 1 billion fish were killed in North Carolina by a disease linked to the runoff from slaughterhouse lagoons. People had to use bulldozers to bury the dead fish. The amount of waste created by the cattle that pass through Weld County is staggering. The 2 feedlots outside Greeley produce more pee and poop than the cities of Denver, Boston, Atlanta, and St. Louis combined. The smell from the slaughterhouse lagoons isn't just unpleasant, it can also be harmful. The pools of waste emit various dangerous gases, including hydrogen sulfide and ammonia. Hydrogen sulfide, also known as sewer gas or stink damp, can be harmless in very small doses. Our own digestive system produces it. Bad breath gets some of its bad smell from tiny amounts of hydrogen sulfide. Large concentrations of hydrogen sulfide can kill you, although nobody's breath has ever been that bad. And even small amounts, inhaled over a long period of time, can cause all kinds of health problems. Slaughterhouse lagoons release tons of hydrogen sulfide into the air. People who live nearby often complain about headaches, nausea, asthma, shortness of breath, and dizziness. Some studies suggest that breathing air polluted with hydrogen sulfide can cause permanent damage to the nervous system and the brain. Farmers and ranchers have always used some of the manure from their animals as fertilizer. Putting manure on a field can be a good way to help crops grow, but no society in human history has ever had feedlots and slaughterhouses as big as the ones near Greeley. There have never been so many animals and so much manure in one place before. Strange things can happen when you don't watch out. In the fall of 2004, a pile of manure at a large feedlot in Milford, Nebraska, caught on fire. As manure decomposes, it gets hot and it releases gases that can burn easily, such as methane. If there's enough manure, it can catch on fire even when nobody lights a match. Big manure fires are no longer unusual. At the Milford feedlot, once the 4 million pound, 30-foot high pile of manure started to burn, it was hard to put out. The local fire department tried twice without success. When the owner flattened the pile with heavy equipment, the smoldering fire spread. Spraying a lot of water on it threatened to pollute nearby streams. The massive pile of poop burned for nearly 4 months, with smoke drifting from it for miles. Mr. McDonald's breasts. Many cattle ranchers now fear that the beef industry is deliberately being changed to operate like the chicken industry. And ranchers don't want to wind up like chicken growers, who over time have become largely powerless, trapped by debt and by strict contracts written by the meatpacking companies. Four chicken companies now control more than half the American market. These companies have shifted almost all of their chicken production to the rural South, where the weather tends to be mild, labor unions are weak, and farmers are desperate to find some way to stay on their land. Although many factors are responsible for changing the chicken industry, one invention played an especially important role. The Chicken McNugget turned a bird that once had to be carved at a table into something that could easily be eaten behind the wheel of a car. It turned an agricultural commodity into a manufactured product, and it encouraged a system of production that turns many American chicken farmers, into economic serfs who must always obey company orders. "I have an idea," Fred Turner, the chairman of McDonald's, told one of his suppliers in 1979. "I want a chicken finger food without bones, about the size of your thumb. Can you do it?" The supplier, an executive at Keystone Foods, ordered a group of researchers to get to work in the lab, where they were soon joined by food scientists from McDonald's. At the time, doctors were praising the health benefits of eating chicken instead of beef. People in the United States were starting to eat a lot more chicken, a trend with worrisome implications for a fast food chain that only sold hamburgers. The nation's chicken meat had traditionally been provided by hens who had grown too old to lay eggs. In the early 20th century, most chicken farms were small. The birds lived as long as 6 years, roaming outdoors and eating grass. After World War II, chicken farms emerged in Delaware and Virginia on a much larger scale. Raising chickens to be eaten and raising hens to lay eggs became two separate businesses. They had one thing in common. Both started to operate much more like factories than like old-fashioned farms. Fred Turner wanted McDonald's to sell a chicken dish that would fit neatly with the chain's other menu items. After 6 months of intensive research, the Keystone Foods lab developed new technology for the manufacture of McNuggets, small pieces of ground-up chicken meat that were stuck together with edible paste, breaded, fried, frozen, and then reheated. The initial test marketing of McNuggets was so successful that McDonald's soon asked another company, Tyson Foods, to start manufacturing them too. Based in Arkansas, Tyson was one of the nation's leading meatpacking companies, and it soon developed a whole new breed of chicken for the production of McNuggets. Named Mr. McDonald, the new breed of chickens had unusually large breasts. Chicken McNuggets were introduced in 1983. Within a month, the McDonald's Corporation had become the second largest purchaser of chicken in the United States, surpassed only by KFC. McNuggets tasted good, they were easy to chew, and they seemed to be healthier than all the other items on the menu at McDonald's. After all, they were made out of chicken, but their health benefits were an illusion. When a researcher at Harvard Medical School performed a chemical analysis of McNuggets, he discovered that they contained many of the same unhealthy fats as beef. How could that be? Well, the McNuggets were being cooked in beef fat, just like the McDonald's fries. The chain soon switched to vegetable oil, adding beef flavoring to the McNuggets to maintain their familiar taste. Chicken McNuggets, which became wildly popular among small children, no longer get their flavor from beef additives, but they still contain more fat per ounce than a hamburger. The McNugget helped transform not only the American diet, but also its system for raising poultry. The impact of McNuggets was so huge that it changed the industry. The president of ConAgra Poultry, the nation's second largest chicken company, later said, 25 years ago, Most chicken was sold whole in the United States. Today, about 90% of the chicken sold has already been cut into pieces, cutlets, or nuggets. Gaining the McNugget contract helped turn Tyson Foods into the world's largest chicken processor. Tyson now manufactures about half of the nation's McNuggets and supplies chicken to 90 of the 100 largest restaurant chains. It now breeds, slaughters, and processes chicken. It does not, however, raise the birds. It leaves most of the expense and the risk of that task to thousands of farmers. A Tyson chicken farmer never owns the birds in his or her poultry houses. Like most of the other leading processors, Tyson supplies its farmers with one-day-old chicks. Between the day they are born and the day they are killed, the birds spend their entire lives on the farmer's property. But they belong to Tyson. The company supplies the chicken feed, veterinary services, and technical support. It decides the feeding schedules, demands the purchase of certain equipment, and employs flock supervisors to make sure that these corporate orders are being followed. It hires the trucks that drop off the baby chicks and return 6 weeks later to pick up full-grown chickens ready for slaughter. At the processing plant, Tyson employees count and weigh the birds. A farmer's earnings are determined by Tyson's count of the birds, Tyson's measure of their weight, and the amount of Tyson feed that has been used. The chicken farmer provides the land, the fuel, the chicken houses, and the hard work. Most farmers must borrow money to build the houses, which cost about $200,000 each. A typical chicken farmer has been raising the birds for 15 years, owns 3 chicken houses, still remains deeply in debt, and after expenses earns about $12,000 a year. About half the nation's chicken growers leave the business after just 3 years, either selling out or losing everything. The back roads of the rural South are now littered with abandoned chicken houses. McCannibals. Nora Smith raises chickens in West Virginia. Like the farmers who supply Tyson, she never owns the birds in her chicken houses. Another company drops off day-old chicks at her farm and comes back with a truck a little more than a month later to take the chickens to the slaughterhouse. While the birds are at her place, the company tells her when to feed them and how to take care of them, sending over supervisors to make sure she's doing everything the way that they want it done. After the company picks up the chickens, it decides how much to pay her. She has no control over the price given for her birds. Nora originally went into the business because she wanted to be an independent farmer. She thought raising chickens might enable her and her husband to have a comfortable life. But now she has 3 different jobs and works 60 hours a week just to make ends meet. A few years ago, her husband had a heart attack, and Nora works hard to pay for his health insurance. On a recent morning at the farm, Nora pulled open the door to one of her chicken houses. The building was as long as a football field, and inside you could see 30,000 chickens packed closely together. The squawking of so many birds made a tremendous noise. The air was full of dust, white feathers, and a really bad smell. The birds were 19 days old. They had only 18 more days to live. Aside from their first day and their last day of life, they would never set foot outdoors. They were being fed a grayish mixture of old pretzels and cookies covered in a layer of fat. Chicken feed is often made out of whatever can be bought inexpensively. Sometimes the leftover waste from cattle slaughterhouses is added to chicken feed. Sometimes the leftover meat, fat, blood, and bones from chicken slaughterhouses is added to chicken food, turning the birds into cannibals. The aim is to provide feed that will fatten chickens as quickly and as cheaply as possible. In the wild, chickens don't eat other chickens. They prefer grass and insects. These chickens will never see grass in their lives, Nora said. The industrialization of meatpacking has not only changed the way that chickens are raised, it has also changed the birds themselves. In 1994, Japanese scientists discovered that the origins of every chicken in the world could be traced back 8,000 years to a wild bird in Thailand called the red jungle fowl. Deep in the forests of Thailand, Pakistan, and India, red jungle fowls still live in their original habitat. The birds are colorful. The feathers of the male are green, red, and gold. Unlike today's commercially engineered chickens, red jungle fowls can fly. They can't soar high like a hawk, but they can fly short distances. Thousands of years ago, people began to keep red jungle fowls in cages, using them first in religious ceremonies, later as food. Farmers mated large birds with one another, eventually producing a bird with a thick chest that looked a lot like the modern chicken. It had more meat, but could not fly very well. Unable to escape easily from predators, Chickens became a tasty meal for foxes, skunks, dogs, cats, and hawks, as well as people. Like the Mr. McDonald breed, the chickens raised for the fast food industry have been engineered to develop large breasts and reach maturity in a short time. In 1965, chickens gained roughly 3.5 pounds during about 2 months on the farm. Today, they gain about 5.5 pounds in little more than half that time. If a child gained weight that fast, he or she would weigh 286 pounds by the age of 6. Some chickens grow such big breasts that they have a hard time walking, when they have any room to walk. Their legs become crooked from all the weight and fill with fluid. They live in constant pain. Today's chickens also develop heart problems. They're big and fat and don't have any chance to exercise. Nora's been surprised by how many of her birds are having heart attacks. It seems to happen every day now. A chicken having a heart attack will suddenly stand up, get a startled look in its eyes, and then flip over and die. If you cut the dead bird open, you find a thick layer of fat around the heart. Chickens that die from heart attacks have been struck by flip-over disease. It's most likely caused by gaining too much weight too fast. Nora collects the dead birds in a bag and uses them as compost. Shocking. In 2006, about 9 billion chickens were raised in the United States, slaughtered, and then eaten. That works out to almost 30 chickens for every man, woman, and child in the country. Killing a chicken has never been pleasant. The old-fashioned method used by farmers for centuries is to chop off their heads with an axe. You've probably heard that a chicken can run around for a few moments without its head. That's true, although it's not something farmers like to see. The billions of chickens slaughtered every year to make McNuggets and KFC crispy tenders don't get a chance to run around without their heads. They're killed at enormous slaughterhouses, hanging upside down, their legs shackled to a fast-moving chain that carries thousands of birds. Unlike the assembly lines at an automobile factory where cars are put together, the production lines at a modern slaughterhouse are geared for disassembly, as one animal after another is killed and then rapidly taken apart. 15 miles from Nora's farm, there's a slaughterhouse run by a company with an all-American name, Pilgrim's Pride. The name suggests a product that's wholesome and pure. Many of the farmers in Nora's neighborhood raise birds for Pilgrim's Pride, which sells chicken meat to KFC and other fast food chains. The slaughterhouse is a white building with a chain-link fence around it. Little smokestacks rise from different parts of the roof, sending puffs of steam into the air. It doesn't look like a scary place full of death and dying. It looks like a factory that could be making chocolate bars, lawn chairs, or tennis shoes. You can tell it's a slaughterhouse when big trucks start pulling up, full of rustling and squawking chickens in their cages, their white feathers visible behind metal bars. When chickens arrive at the Pilgrim's Pride slaughterhouse, their cages are rolled onto conveyor belts and tipped over. The birds tumble down a ramp that resembles a playground slide. When they land at the bottom, workers grab their legs and attach them to a moving overhead chain. Sometimes chickens break their legs, trying to wriggle free. The chain carries them upside down to a huge tank of water that's charged with electricity. When the birds are dunked into the water, the electricity is supposed to knock them unconscious. Chickens that have been properly shocked don't feel what happens next. But some birds manage to avoid the water by twisting their bodies and flapping their wings, or they come out of the water still wide awake. Several years ago, McDonald's admitted that 1 or 2 out of every 100 chickens processed by the company's suppliers aren't knocked out by the stun bath. What happens next is painless for the birds that are unconscious, but cruel to those still awake. The moving chain carries the chickens to a sharp rotating blade that slits their throats. The blade reliably kills almost all the chickens. Every so often, however, a bird that's still awake moves its head out of the way and dodges the blade. Moments later, that bird can suffer a painful death. The chain dunks the chickens into a tank of boiling water. Called the scald tank, it helps remove their feathers. It looks like a witch's brew of bubbling, bloody liquid. No chicken has ever been known to survive the scald tank. The birds that somehow live to this point are boiled to death. The company motto at Pilgrim's Pride is fresh from the farm every day, and the company website features cartoons of happy, smiling chickens. Yet, a 2004 videotape shot inside the slaughterhouse near Nora's farm reveals little to smile about. The video was made by an animal rights activist upset by how the chickens were being treated at the plant. On some days, so many chickens would arrive there at once that workers didn't have enough time to shackle every bird's legs. Instead of attaching them to the overhead chain, workers would throw leftover birds against the wall. Some of the chickens that hit the wall were knocked out, but others continued to squawk and flap around. The video shows frustrated workers jumping up and down on the birds, or picking them up and throwing them against the wall again. According to the animal rights activist, one worker put 3 live chickens on the floor and jumped on each of them. "I like to hear the popping sound they make," said the worker. The cruelty at the Pilgrim's Pride slaughterhouse was caused by a production line that moved too quickly and by workers who were poorly supervised. But even a well-run American slaughterhouse inflicts unnecessary suffering on birds. At many European slaughterhouses, chickens aren't dumped from cages, grabbed and shackled to a chain, and then dropped into an electrified stun bath. They are kept in crates, placed in a sealed chamber, and then forced to breathe a gas that painlessly knocks them unconscious. At slaughterhouses that use this controlled atmosphere stunning system, workers never have to handle live birds, and chickens never get boiled alive. A study of controlled atmosphere stunning released by McDonald's in July of 2005 concluded that it was more efficient than using a stun bath, better for the welfare of the birds, and better for the workers in the plant, without affecting the quality of the meat. But it was also more expensive, and McDonald's currently has no plans to ask chicken suppliers to get rid of their shackles and stun baths. Turn to page 172. Cook it well. In January 1993, doctors at a hospital in Seattle, Washington noticed that an unusual number of children were being admitted with bloody diarrhea. Some were suffering from a rare disorder that causes kidney damage. Health officials soon realized that the sick children had recently eaten undercooked hamburgers served at a local Jack in the Box restaurant. Tests of the hamburger patties revealed the presence of E. coli O157H7, a bacterium that can cause severe food poisoning. Jack in the Box issued an immediate recall of the contaminated ground beef. Nevertheless, more than 700 people in at least 4 states were sickened by Jack in the Box hamburgers. Nearly 200 people were hospitalized, and 4 died. Most of the victims were children. One of the first kids to become ill, Lauren Beth Rudolph, ate a hamburger at a Jack in the Box a week before Christmas. She was admitted to the hospital on Christmas Eve, suffered terrible pain, had 3 heart attacks, and died in her mother's arms on December 28, 1992. She was 6 years old. The Jack in the Box outbreak received a great deal of attention on television and in the newspapers, alerting the public to the dangers of E. coli O157H7. The Jack in the Box chain almost went out of business amid all the bad publicity, but this wasn't the first outbreak of E. coli linked to fast food hamburgers. In 1982, dozens of children were sickened by contaminated hamburgers sold at McDonald's restaurants in Oregon and Michigan. McDonald's had quietly cooperated with government investigators, providing ground beef samples contaminated with E. coli, samples that, for the first time, linked the germ to serious illness. In public, however, the McDonald's Corporation denied that its hamburgers had made anyone sick. A spokesman for the chain acknowledged only the possibility of a statistical association between a small number of diarrhea cases in 2 small towns and our restaurants. Every day in the United States, roughly 200,000 people are sickened by something they ate, 900 are hospitalized, and 14 die. More than 1/4 of the American population suffers a bout of food poisoning each year. Most of these cases are never reported to authorities or properly diagnosed. The widespread outbreaks that are detected and identified represent a small fraction of the number that actually take place. And there is strong evidence that the number of people getting sickened by food has gone up in the past few decades. Much of this increase can be blamed on recent changes in the way American food is produced. A generation ago, the typical outbreak of food poisoning involved a small gathering, a church supper, a family picnic, a wedding reception. Contaminated food made a group of people in one local area get sick. Such traditional outbreaks still take place, but the nation's current system of food processing has created a whole new sort of outbreak, one that can potentially sicken millions of people. The construction of huge feedlots, slaughterhouses, and hamburger grinders has made it easier for E. coli and other nasty germs to spread through the nation's food supply. In the 1970s, there were thousands of small slaughterhouses in the United States. Today, 13 large slaughterhouses supply most of the beef eaten by almost 300 million Americans. The meatpacking system that arose to supply the nation's fast food chains, an entire industry molded to serve their needs, to provide gigantic amounts of uniform ground beef so that all McDonald's hamburgers would taste the same, has proved to be an extremely efficient system for spreading disease. While medical researchers have pointed out the links between modern food processing and the rise in food poisoning, the nation's leading meatpacking companies have strongly opposed government efforts to pass tough food safety laws. For years, the meatpacking industry has managed to avoid the kinds of rules that apply to the manufacturers of most consumer products. If a defective toy somehow poses a risk to small children, for example, if a piece could easily break off and be swallowed, the U.S. government can demand that every one of those toys be removed from stores. But the U.S. government could not order a meatpacking company to remove contaminated, potentially lethal ground beef from fast food kitchens and supermarkets, even if that meat could kill children. The risk of contamination begins in the feedlot. Far from their optimal habitat on the prairie, cattle in feedlots become prone to all sorts of illnesses. They get little exercise and live amid pools of manure. You shouldn't eat dirty food and dirty water, a government health official says. But we still think we can give animals dirty food and dirty water. Modern feedlots have become places where germs are easily spread from one animal to another. E. coli can live in cattle troughs and survive in cattle manure for up to 90 days. The germs from infected cattle are spread not only in feedlots, but also at slaughterhouses and hamburger grinders. The slaughterhouse tasks most likely to contaminate meat are the removal of an animal's furry hide and of its digestive system. If the hide hasn't been properly cleaned well, chunks of dirt and poop may fall from it onto the meat. The digestive system is still pulled out of the cattle by hand. If the job is not performed carefully, the contents of the stomach and the intestines may spill everywhere. The speed of today's production lines makes the task much more difficult. A single worker at a gut table may have to pull the guts out of 60 cattle every hour. Doing the job properly takes a fair amount of skill. Doing it wrong spills the stomach contents, full of germs, all over the meat. Knives are supposed to be cleaned and disinfected every few minutes, something that workers in a hurry tend to forget. A contaminated knife spreads germs to everything it touches. The faster the line, the more likely that people will make mistakes. The risk of widespread contamination grows when the meat is turned into ground beef. A generation ago, local butchers made hamburger out of leftover scraps. Ground beef was sold locally, and it was often made from cattle slaughtered locally. Today, enormous slaughterhouses and grinders dominate the production of ground beef. A modern plant can produce almost 1 million pounds of hamburger meat a day, shipping it throughout the United States and even overseas. A single animal infected with E. coli can contaminate 32,000 pounds of that ground beef. To make matters worse, the animals used to make about 1/4 of the nation's ground beef, old dairy cattle, are those most likely to be sick and diseased. Dairy cows can live 20 or more years, but they're often slaughtered between the ages of 4 and 7 after their rate of milk production starts to fall. McDonald's relies heavily on dairy cattle for its hamburger supplies, since the animals are relatively cheap and yield leaner meat. The days when hamburger meat was ground in the back of a little butcher shop out of leftover scraps of beef are long gone. The mixing together of meat from a large number of animals at ground beef plants has played a crucial role in spreading E. coli. A single fast food hamburger now may contain meat from hundreds or even thousands of different cattle. Children who eat ground beef must make sure that it has been completely cooked. It should be well done. There shouldn't be a single particle of meat that still looks pink. Cooking the meat thoroughly kills germs like E. coli, but it doesn't change a rather unappetizing fact. There are all sorts of complicated scientific explanations for how germs are spread in feedlots, how germs are spread in slaughterhouses, how germs are spread in hamburger plants. Behind them lies a simple explanation for why eating a hamburger can now make you seriously ill. There is poop in the meat. Run. Chickens are pretty dumb. Cattle are smarter, and pigs are rather intelligent. In fact, pigs are even smarter than dogs. Pigs are also sensitive, highly social animals. Contrary to what many people think, they like being clean and roll in the mud only on hot days to cool themselves off. For thousands of years, pigs have been raised by farmers, allowed to roam outdoors until it's time to be turned into bacon, pork, or ham. During the past 20 years, however, pigs have been raised indoors at giant hog factories that look more like prisons than farms. The mother pigs are often confined for months in crates that are so small they can't walk or turn around. Piglets are taken away from their mothers at the age of 3 weeks, about 3 months earlier than they would separate from each other in the wild. The piglets are crammed into pens with steel floors. The pens are so crowded that the piglets, which are friendly by nature, start biting each other's tails. To prevent injuries and infections, workers now cut the tails off. Scientists have little idea what pigs, cows, and chickens might be thinking as they head to their deaths at a slaughterhouse. It's unlikely that they know what's about to happen. Many farm animals have been bred to be calm. Most of the time, they appear to lack emotions. But you can tell when cattle are frightened. They tend to bellow. The latest slaughterhouses are designed to keep cattle quiet and relaxed as they march up the ramp to their doom. The ramps curve and have walls on either side to prevent the cattle from seeing what's ahead. While most livestock never realize what they're about to become pieces of meat, every so often an animal seems to know exactly what's going on. On January 8, 1998, at the V&G Newman Slaughterhouse in Malmesbury, England, 2 pigs were just minutes away from being killed when they wriggled through a hole in the fence, swam across a nearby river, and ran off. Newspapers soon called the pigs Butch and Sundance, nicknames referring to the Wild West outlaws in the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Despite an intensive search by television crews, local police officers, and animal rights activists, Butch and Sundance roamed free for more than a week. Sundance was finally cornered and shot with a tranquilizer dart that made him feel sleepy. Butch was discovered in somebody's backyard garden looking for a snack. Butch, it turned out, was actually female. She was thought to be Sundance's girlfriend. A British newspaper, the Daily Mail, bought the 2 pigs and donated them to a farm in Kent. Butch and Sundance lived out their days there, happily playing and sunbathing outdoors. A few years earlier, an American dairy cow named Emily attempted a similarly daring escape. Although she was only 2 years old, her owner thought that she wasn't producing enough milk and sent her to a slaughterhouse in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. On November 14, 1995, Emily stood in a line with other cattle inside the slaughterhouse gates. Moments before it was her turn to enter the building, Emily suddenly decided to run off. Workers said that she leaped over a 5-foot-high fence, kept on running, and disappeared into the woods. For more than a month, she lived in the woods amid herds of deer, foraging for food. A couple of vegetarians found Emily, adopted her, and took her home to their farm. Children from a nearby school helped to take care of her. A group of Hindu priests from India visited her and blessed her as a sacred cow. When Emily died of natural causes in 2003, dozens of people attended her funeral, and a statue was later placed at her grave.